Good. So Jan asked me to talk a little bit about how to build deep tech companies. So that there's no confusion, I don't actually build them myself. I help people that build these companies by typically being chairman on their board. Now, as famous people have said, hardware, because we're going to talk about deep tech, but not just software, we're going to talk about hardware. Hardware is actually really hard. So to build a deep tech hardware company is a difficult thing to do. So the first question, of course, is why would we bother? Why would we want to do the hard thing? And I'm going to quote Peter Thiel on that one, which is because 140, and that was of course a bit of a fling at Twitter, 140 characters is not enough. So for me, that meant I got involved in Orbex, sustainable rockets on sustainable fuel out of, that's actually the actual rocket in Scotland. I got involved in flying cars, as one does, hydrogen-based, so 1,000-kilometer range. Got involved in 3D printers, automaker, leader in that space. We bought our main competitor in the US last year. First light fusion, which is going to be presenting after this. Nuclear fusion, the Oxford spin-out and the leader in inertia-confined fusion. And of course, Next Wave, where Davor was presenting earlier today, solar wafers to hopefully bring back the industry to the Western world. So I do this because I am passionate about this. I think it's important that we don't just optimize the grid and do software for charging stations. I think we actually need to generate clean energy itself. And that's why I do these things. But of course, it also needs to work. So the question Jan asked me is, so can you talk about what does it take to make this work? And I think there's actually 4 things that are important. I'm going to talk about each of those 4. Actually, I'm going to talk a lot about the 4th one, but you need real external pull. So if you need to push yourself into a market, not very good. You need to minimize the number of screws. Come to that. Cash is king, because hardware is not just hard, it's also expensive. And you need to have the right company culture. Now, we start with a bit of math. I think you guys will quickly agree that 500 times 10 is 5,000, divided by 10% is 50,000, right? Now, what do I mean with that? If you assume that for a hardware company, you need $500 million, and you can take whatever number you have in your company, but $500 million to get there, then for people, when they invest in that and take that risk, they want a 10x return on that investment. They think you probably have a 10% probability of actually getting there. That means you need a 50 billion exit valuation. Now, you don't get a 50 billion equity valuation in a $5 billion market, right? I mean, the example that I was part of, I made an investment in the early days in Spotify. We put 14 million in, took 740 million out. That was a 35 billion exit in a $30 billion market. So I think that's probably roughly where you can go, right? The size of the market can be the size of the exit of you. So a $5 billion market is just not enough. It needs to be a $50 billion market, a $500 billion market. Now, the good news in energy is the mother of all industries. The markets are huge, so you do have these big markets, but make sure that you have that big market, and that market needs your solution. Screws, minimize the amount of screws. I always like to, close my eyes and, think about what is this thing going to look like in the end of the day, and then count, and of course, metaphorically speaking, count the number of screws in the solution. And if you, in the end of the day, you have 500 screws in the solution and 99% sure, certainty that they are fastened, if you do the math on that, that is actually a 0.66% probability that all of them are fastened. So in other words, if you have a lot of screws, well, here's early days of flying. I mean, a lot of screws on the left-hand side, not that many on the right-hand side. I think the reason why you all know that picture on the right, which is the Wright brothers, of course, and no one knows that picture on the left, is too many flipping screws, too complex. So try to find a solution that is simple and that doesn't have a lot of complexity to it. The other really important thing is that money does talk in the end. So you need to raise early and you need to raise a lot of money. And one of the reasons is that if you're in a big market, and you got a good solution, you can just bet your bottom dollar that the Americans are going to come after you, and they're going to come after you with violence and with a lot of money, right? I mean, that is always the case. It's easier for them to raise money than for the European companies, that we all are. So you want to make sure that you raise a lot of money, you're well capitalized early on. Now, how do you do that? You need to think and talk investment case from the very beginning. I mean, if you talk technology, and you try to get people to put a lot of money in it because you got the most fantastic, technology looking for a market, that's not good. So you want to talk investment case from the beginning, and you want to consider all of the investment options out there. So equity obviously is one. A lot of people here are, and that's what we are here for. But government funding is an important part of funding. You can even consider debt, and I think strategic partnerships, where strategic partners are able to put money in your company or in your solution, is the other really important part of it. And then the last thing, which is maybe the most important thing, if you want to have a successful clean tech hardware company, deep tech company, it can't be a normal company. So you need to have a company culture that is just different than most other companies out there. So I've been in this business for actually by now almost 40 years. I co-founded 6 companies. I've been a venture capitalist for 20 years, and I've been chairing companies for almost 10 years now. And so I've seen a lot of companies, and I've tried to find a pattern. And it's what I call my 4-genome DNA of a hyper-growth startup. Hyper-growth because you need to grow quicker than anything else. The 4 things, and I'll go into them, is set a long-term strategy with quarterly goals, have a really high clock frequency in your decision-making in the company, grow by partnership, and have the right team at all times. Now, what does that mean? You need, of course, to have your polar star. You need to know where in the end game you want to be. But if you only tell your team, in 5 years, this is where we're going to be, and you leave it to people to figure out what to do every week, every month, every quarter, that doesn't work. So you need, as a CEO, as a founder, as a management team, you need to translate that back into short-term goals, right? And when I say polar star long-term, I'm talking 5 years, right? I'm not talking 50 years, right? The second thing is high clock frequency. So, you run fast and break things is what they say in Silicon Valley. And the way to simply think about it is people that don't take decisions don't ever take a wrong decision, but also never take a right one. Take 10 decisions every day. 2 of them are wrong. That means you took 8 good ones. And the 2 ones which were wrong, you fix it later. So be quick, make decisions, try things, and if it doesn't work, do it differently. Probably the most important thing for what I see most startup companies do wrong is that they think of that, and this is a framework, by the way. I hate business school frameworks. I even hate Peter Drucker more than any of the other business school professors. This actually comes from him. It's pretty good, I think, this particular one. So technology founders tend to think of the solution as we have the technology, we do everything ourselves, and yeah, there may be a couple of small things around that where we need to have partners. It's called the skinny donut version of it, where actually, if you look at the really successful technology companies, without exception, they all thought, okay, how can I limit what we do to the smallest possible piece of the technology that really only we can do? And we do that really well, and we make sure no one else can do it as well as we can, and we find partners to do all the stuff around it, which are better equipped to do that. And that's how you lever these partnerships into success for your company. Again, you don't need to invest in all these things. And of course, you don't get rid of the challenge. You still need to have all that, and you create a new challenge, because now you need to get other people to do things which you become dependent on. So it's a very different challenge, but in my experience, for technology companies, it's the easier one to manage. And then the last point of the 4-genome DNA is you need to have the right time at all times. So I think pretty clear that you need superpowers to do a startup company, but what superpowers you need actually evolves over time. Now the good news is that typically these startup companies, if they do well, they grow. So it doesn't mean you need to, fire people and then, get new people in and have this constant rush through of people. It means you need to add new talent and even, ask people that have had a certain role in the company to take a different role in the company and bring in other people that have the new superpowers that you need for the new time where you are. You cannot have dead weight in a company. Every role in a company costs money. Money is the thing that you need to, we talked about it, cash is king. And so everyone becomes a point of failure. So, and you have to realize as a founder that, as a management team, that you need to keep on changing your team over time because it's impossible to make people personally grow at the pace you want your company to grow at. If you do that, your company is going to grow very slow, and in deep tech, you're going to die. So that was my 10 cents, my 5 minutes on this topic. And yeah, all I can say is thank you very much.